Will you pray with me? O holy and gracious God, may the words of my mouth and the meditation on all of our hearts be acceptable in your sight. For you, O God, you are our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. So we are in the second week of our series, Come Alive. And in this series, we are seeking to build on the work that we had done a few months back with our Holy Excavations workshop that the Texas Methodist Foundation led for us. And in that workshop, we discussed what it looked like to create cultures of purpose, generosity, and courage. And just to remind you a little bit more about what we mean by that, it is the value in being clear about who we are, what our purpose is, generous in all that we do, and bold in how we do it. And so we are asking questions. We are seeking clarity as we try to be very certain of the purpose that God has for us. And my guess is you have sat there and read newsletter articles and heard me talk about we need to come together and ask these questions about who we are and where we are going. You're going, we've done this already. Right? We have done this before. We've done this 4 times since I've been here. We have done this. And yet, we have stopped short of getting really clear about who we are and what we're called to do. We absolutely have a commitment to children, students, and families. We absolutely have a commitment to being in ministry with our senior adults. And we absolutely have a commitment to being engaged in outreach and mission with our neighbors. And those are great high-level focus areas. But at some point, we got to get down a little bit deeper to understand what is it within those areas that God is specifically calling us to do. So purpose is critical to helping us understand and make decisions and get engaged in the work that God has for us, but aligning to God's purpose is even more so. And so we look at this story. Anybody ever heard this story before? Right? This is a familiar story. We've heard this. Everybody's heard this story of Saul's conversion, of being struck blind on the way to Damascus. The guy that was ready to persecute and prosecute and murder as many people as he could. Saul was clear about his purpose. Saul knew who he was. He was a student of the law. He was, in his own words, zealous for the law. He was very clear about his purpose. And my guess is he would have argued that his purpose was aligned with God's purposes. He believed so strongly in what he was doing, even as he was persecuting the people who followed the Christ. Now, my guess is that the religious leadership of that day was operating out of fear. There was a real fear that they could lose some of their power, a real fear that they could lose some of their standing. You see, they were very good at observing Torah. They were very good at following the temple practices. And this whole Jesus thing threatened to challenge that. It was trying to call them deeper. And they were clinging to the law and clinging to the practices that had in many ways replaced their relationship with God. And so Jesus intervenes. Of course, this is the risen Jesus. Jesus intervenes. Saul is on his way with his buddies and his letters, and he's going to Damascus, and he's going to round up those scoundrel followers of Jesus and bind them and take them back for prosecution. And Jesus appears to him and strikes him blind. Now, this isn't enough to make you wish that you never had a really personal encounter with Jesus, right? I mean, most of us, if we're honest, we'd like something really bold and obvious. I'm good with burning bushes. But this idea that having an encounter that you need to have with Jesus results in blindness is a little scary. And so he falls to the ground as he's listening. And the reply is, I am Jesus whom you are persecuting. Get up, go to the city, and do what you are told to do. Now, he's with his buddies. His buddies don't see anything. I mean, they can still see, but they don't see anything that's going on, but they did hear. And so after Saul is told to get up and go on into the city, he gets up off the ground, which is where you and I would be too. He gets up off the ground and opens his eyes and realizes that he cannot see. And he is dependent on his cohorts to lead him into town. Meanwhile, Jesus appears to one of the followers, one of the disciples, Ananias. And I love this exchange because as Jesus appears to him and says, okay, there's this man named Saul of Tarsus, and he's staying with Judas. Now, don't get confused with all the Judases, okay? Just think of Bob's or Bill's or David's, right? Judas was a common name. But the vision is you need to go see this Saul of Tarsus who is staying with Judas on Straight Street, and you need to go lay hands on him. And I love this because Ananias knows he's talking to the risen Lord and still thinks that maybe the risen Lord has missed something. Were you not aware? I don't know if you know this, God, but I don't know if you know this, Lord, but this man's been persecuting us. In fact, he's on his way here to try to round us up and bind us and take us back to Jerusalem. I'm not sure if you knew that. And Jesus is probably, yes, I knew that. And he says, I have chosen him. He is the instrument that I will use. And so in this story, what we see is a man who was very clear on what he understood his purpose to be, having an encounter not only with the risen Christ, but having an encounter that involved those who thought like him and those from beyond his community to help him gain clarity on what it is that God was seeking for him to do in his life. Now, the impact this had, and of course, you remember the rest of the story. Ananias does come over, he does lay hands. Saul is able to see again, immediately gets baptized, and then begins to preach in the synagogues that Jesus is indeed the Son of God. And so the impact on Paul's life personally, or Saul's life, we haven't changed his name just yet, that's coming. But the impact on Saul's life personally is very profound. He has now a very deep sense of a higher calling for his life, of a relationship that he now has with the one who provides salvation. And he believes with everything that is within him that it is his responsibility to help others know this Jesus, this Messiah that he and his cohorts have been waiting for. And so it does have a personal impact on him. But it also has a wider communal impact. Paul becomes one of the earliest, greatest, most prolific church planters, preachers, amazing evangelists ever. He goes out and plants churches all over the place. He is able to communicate in a way that people begin to understand that there is one who loves them, there is one who has more for them, there is one who will guide them. And he is able to do this because he got so clear with the help of his community and the wider community, and of course, with the help of the risen Christ. He became so clear about what he was called to do. And you'll notice that when Jesus stopped him and blinded him, he didn't give him all the information right then. He said, okay, I want you to get up and go on to town, and then you'll know what to do. I'll tell you what to do later. And so we will continue to ask questions. And my guess is every question that we think we have answered will raise more questions. And we will be patient as we wait for God to reveal what it is that God seeks us to know. And we will be open, I pray, to hearing not only from among ourselves, but also from the community that we seek to be in ministry with and for. And so we have much work to do. We have some exciting ministries that are opening doors into our community right now. This is an incredible time. The good news is, I think the good news is, I don't think we're going to be struck blind for a while. I pray we're not struck blind for a while. But I trust that if you and I will follow through and be committed to discerning what this God seeks from us, the impact it will have on our lives will be incredible. Thanks be to God. Amen.